and all those who care about the future of our planet. I'm speaking today in response to a recent Dear friends, and all those who care about the future of our planet. I'm speaking today in response to a recent publication on a widely respected media platform. In that article, certain scientific findings on the presence and dangers of micro and nanoplastics in the human body were called into question. Notably, the key arguments relied on comments from a specialist directly affiliated with a large corporation in the plastic industry. As a result, public discussions, attention, and resources are once again being diverted away from solutions and toward ideological debate. Whether intentional or not, such publications create a misleading sense of reassurance, the impression that things aren't as bad as they say. But questioning the danger of micro nanoplastics to human health and the biosphere is a huge mistake. Scientists today are not trying to scare anyone. Their conclusions are based on objective research that is meant to help the public understand the real risks. At ALLATRA, we have been studying micro nanoplastics for more than 2 decades. We're not funded by corporations, nor are we affiliated with politics or religion. And we call things by their proper names, regardless of whether it's convenient or not. So let me state this plainly. Micro and nanoplastics represent one of the most serious threats facing humanity today. A large and growing body of evidence shows that plastic particles have already penetrated the environment and the living organisms. And many peer-reviewed studies confirm the presence of micro and nanoplastics in water, air, soil, and animals. This includes humans, where these particles have been detected in the brain, our hearts, our guts, placentas, and other organs. But the mere presence of these tiny plastics is only part of the story. Research increasingly indicates that micro nanoplastics trigger a range of biological effects linked to serious diseases, from metabolic disorders, reproductive dysfunction, to severe neurological problems. As evidence accumulates, the need to take this issue seriously becomes undeniable. And yet, it is concerning that scientific uncertainties are being used for political or for commercial purposes. Some demand a complete ban on plastic production, while others dismiss the research entirely as unreliable. Both responses drain resources and hinder genuine scientific progress. Thus, banning plastic production and destroying this industry is not the solution. Nor is the opposite, when corporations, acting to protect their business interests, attempt to discredit or downplay research on micro nanoplastics. Neither approach will solve the problem. The reality is that plastic underpins much of modern technologies, medicine, and industry today. Eliminating it outright would create a serious social and economic consequences without addressing the core issue. That is a vast amount of micro nanoplastics that already surround us. These particles will not disappear on their own. And right now, they pose a very serious threat to our health and the biosphere. This is precisely why it is time for us to move beyond confrontation, beyond bans on one side, and denial on the other, and focus on practical solutions. At ALLATRA, we propose a different path, directing efforts and resources toward a solution that, based on many years of research, we believe can truly mitigate the risks associated with micro nanoplastics. And the essence of this approach is straightforward. To deprive plastic particles already scattered across the planet, to deprive them of their most dangerous property, that is the ability to accumulate and retain electrostatic charge. Experimental and observational studies indicate that the electrostatic charge of plastic particles play a key role in determining their biological activity. Thus, by neutralizing this property, micro and nanoplastics can become biologically inert, that is no longer capable of causing harm to life, including to humans and on the biosphere as a whole. This is where society's efforts and investment should be directed, towards understanding how these particles interact with living systems, and toward developing safe and effective methods to neutralize the charge. To make this possible, scientists around the world who are studying micro nanoplastics need funding and opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration. They need advanced equipment, shared infrastructure, and access to unified data platforms. The modern scientific community has already proven that it can achieve extraordinary results when we are united around a common goal. Recall the Human Genome Project. Hundreds of research centers, dozens of countries, unified standards, and the results that transformed medicine and biology forever. The plastic crisis demands a similar model of global cooperation. Only under such conditions can we refine methodologies, make critical discoveries, and find the solution that we need. Let me repeat that neither pressure on the industry nor dismissal of scientific research on micro nanoplastics brings us any closer to a solution. Regardless of the debates, plastics particles will continue to accumulate, and the threat will continue to grow. So this means one thing. The global scientific community, public funding agencies, and responsible businesses must urgently direct their attention and resources to the key task. That is to safely neutralize the electrostatic charge of micro nanoplastics. Only then do we have a real chance to protect our and our children's health, preserve technological progress, and safeguard our shared home, planet Earth.
The sixth mass extinction is already underway. The modern world is plunging into a biological collapse, like the ones in the past that wiped out up to 90% of all living creatures on the planet. While past global catastrophes were driven by volcanic eruptions or meteor impacts, today a new factor has joined these forces of nature. Over the past 50 years, the global population of wild animals has declined by nearly 70%. Across the globe, scientists are observing an alarming trend. The number of wild birds is rapidly declining. In North America alone, over the past 50 years, approximately 3 billion birds have disappeared. That is a quarter of the entire bird population. Marine animals and fish lose their ability to accurately locate prey, avoid predators, and follow migration routes. This threatens their survival and leads to population declines.
Nature is not merely a habitat. It's our breath, our nourishment, and our protection. Humanity can survive without technology, but not without air, water, and living organisms. When life on Earth dies, humanity dies with it. The truth is that we do not exist separately from nature, no matter how much we try to convince ourselves otherwise. We're part of it. So you have probably guessed who we're going to talk about next. Yes, about us.
Watch the documentary, Nanoplastics, Threat to Life.
Nanoplastics in the biosphere, from molecular impact to planetary crisis report. Authors, Alatra International Public Movement, in collaboration with Bolivian Catholic University, San Pablo, and the Creative Society International Project. Abstract. If Earth were keeping a diary, the last century would be inked in black with the title, The Plastic Age. From microscopic particles infiltrating cells of living organisms to colossal garbage patches drifting in the oceans, plastics have become etched into the planet's geological record. But at what cost? Every year, the world generates more than 400 million tons of plastic waste, with an estimated 11 million tons entering the world's oceans. To date, over 200 million tons have accumulated in marine environments. Surface water samples reveal that plastics now outweigh zooplankton by a factor of 6. If current trends continue, by 2050, the mass of plastics in the oceans will surpass the mass of all fish. Although plastics take hundreds or even thousands of years to degrade, they break down under the influence of waves, salt water, and ultraviolet radiation into tiny fragments known as micro and nanoplastics. These particles can travel thousands of miles through marine air and precipitation, crossing borders, continents, and oceans. They accumulate in forests and are found in our food and drinking water. Microplastics have been detected in some of the most remote locations on Earth, from the Mariana Trench to the summit of Mount Everest. This report presents a comprehensive analytical assessment of the impact of plastic pollution on the environment, human health, and the resilience of society's critical systems. It examines the behavior of micro and nanoplastics that carry static charges and toxic chemical compounds, and their effects on ecosystems. Particular attention is given to their role in ocean acidification, destabilization of food chains, and threats to biodiversity. The report suggests a hypothesis linking micro and nanoplastics to changes in water properties, which may accelerate ocean warming and intensify natural disasters. One of the most urgent and troubling issues discussed in this report is the impact of micro and nanoplastics, MNPs, on human health. Due to their minute size, these particles can bypass biological barriers, triggering oxidative stress, DNA damage, inflammatory responses, and cellular dysfunction. The report highlights a possible correlation between MNP exposure and the rising prevalence of neurodegenerative and neuropsychiatric disorders. It shows that exposure to MNPs during prenatal and postnatal development can impair cognitive function and mental health in children, posing a serious threat to future generations. The growing incidence of MNP-related diseases is already diminishing the quality of life, particularly in regions with high levels of plastic pollution. The report identifies regions currently facing heightened risk as well as those that so far remain relatively unaffected. If the situation continues to deteriorate and effective protective measures remain unavailable, populations may be forced to migrate in search of safer living conditions. This can lead to waves of uncontrolled migration, heightening social tension, straining urban infrastructure, and destabilizing economies. In this way, the environmental challenge of plastic pollution will gradually evolve into a macroeconomic and geopolitical challenge. The report underscores the urgent need to address MNP pollution, offering a new perspective on distribution, impact, and effects of MNPs. The report is unique as it is based on an interdisciplinary approach that integrates physical, chemical, and biological data on plastic pollution. This makes the report relevant to scientists across a broad range of fields who are committed to developing sustainable solutions for a safer future, for the planet, and for humanity. Consequences of plastic pollution. Micro and nanoplastics as a new driver of the planetary crisis. Plastics have become an inseparable part of present-day life. Packaging and utensils, clothing and footwear, hygiene products and medicine, transportation and communication. Most everyday items are made of plastics. However, plastics do not just exist in the form of large visible objects. They also break down into microscopic particles known as microplastics and nanoplastics. Microplastics are defined as particles smaller than 5 millimeters. often visible to the naked eye. Nanoplastics, on the other hand, measure less than 1 micrometer, 1/1,000,000th of a meter, and most of them are invisible even under a standard microscope. Plastic materials come in a variety of types, but all are composed of polymers, natural or synthetic substances built from long molecular chains. Polymers possess unique chemical properties that make them highly durable and resistant to degradation in the environment. Thus, thanks to their durability, versatility, and low production cost, plastics have become a major material of choice for mass manufacturing, especially for single-use items. However, improper waste management has turned plastics into the world's most voluminous pollutants by mass. Quantitative estimates and trends in global plastic waste production. Since the 1950s, the world has produced approximately 9,200 million metric tons of plastics. Of that, about 2,900 million tons are still in use today, including 2,700 million tons of virgin plastics and roughly 200 million tons of recycled materials. Around 5,300 million tons have ended up in landfills, while 1,000 million tons have been incinerated. An additional 1,750 to 2,500 million tons are classified as mismanaged, meaning they may have entered the environment through uncontrolled channels. To date, nearly 640 million tons of chemical additives have been incorporated into plastic products. According to the United Nations Environment Program, the world now produces more than 400 million tons of plastic waste annually. Only about 9% of plastic waste is recycled, 19% is incinerated, and the rest remains in the environment, including landfills and oceans. Every year, approximately 11 million tons of plastics enter the world's oceans, which is equivalent to more than one garbage truck of plastics being dumped into the ocean every minute. Currently, over 200 million tons of big plastic waste, macroplastics, and approximately 35,540 tons of microplastics have accumulated in the oceans. Estimates of annual plastic waste entering aquatic ecosystems from land sources vary depending on analytical methods. Under a business as usual scenario without intervention, these levels can nearly triple, from 9 to 14 million tons in 2016 to 23 to 37 million tons a year by 2040. Another methodology projects an almost doubling of ocean-bound plastic waste, from 19 to 23 million tons in 2016 to 53 million tons by 2030. As indicated by research, if current trends persist, by 2050, the ocean will hold as much as 12,000 million tons of plastics, rivaling the total biomass of marine fish estimated at roughly 10,000 million tons. Depending on the type, plastics take between 100 and 1,000 years to decompose. In marine environments, especially in the cold, dark depths of the ocean, plastics break down even more slowly. Except for the portion that has been incinerated, virtually all plastics ever introduced into the environment still exist today, either as intact objects or in fragmented form. This waste doesn't disappear and keeps accumulating. The situation is akin to a trash bin that is constantly being filled but never emptied. The question of what that bin might look like after a month indicates the scale of the problem of global plastic waste accumulation. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Plastic waste accumulated in the ocean water and floating on its surface is captured by ocean currents and carried into central gyres, forming massive clusters known as garbage patches. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the largest concentration of plastics on the planet, and it exhibits steady growth. The garbage patch spans a vast area between North America and Japan. Observations indicate that in 2018, its surface area measured about 618,000 square miles, although this figure is subject to fluctuation due to ocean currents and seasonal variability. Studies indicate that up to 80% of the material in the garbage patches consists of plastics. The patch contains at least 80,000 metric tons of plastic waste. Yet, that's just the visible portion of the problem. An estimated 94% of ocean plastic sinks to the seabed, where vast amounts of waste may remain hidden and continue to accumulate. The full extent of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is still unknown, partly because the North Pacific subtropical gyre is so vast that it defies comprehensive scientific mapping with current technology. Dynamics of plastics accumulation in the ocean. Instrument-based measurements show an exponential increase in the size of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Between 2015
and 2022, the average mass of plastic waste in this region grew fivefold. Of particular concern is the tenfold increase in small plastic fragments over the same period, evidencing rapid degradation of larger plastic debris. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch has effectively formed a seventh continent on Earth. However, it is important to note that this phenomenon is not unique. To date, scientists have identified 5 major garbage patches in the world's oceans: 2 in the Atlantic, 2 in the Pacific, and 1 in the Indian Ocean. How micro and nanoplastic particles are formed. Plastic waste is highly resistant to biodegradation. However, under the influence of waves, salt water, and sunlight, it gradually breaks down into smaller particles, micro and nanoplastics, that are often invisible to the naked eye. These particles retain their polymer structure, and the degradation process continues down to the nanoscale. As a result, having bypassed natural degradation mechanisms, plastic waste becomes a permanent component of the planet's ecosystems. Moreover, micro and nanoplastics contain hazardous chemicals that are added during plastic manufacturing. Quote, "We now know that plastics contain roughly 16,000 chemicals. Of these, it is known that over 4,200 are persistent in the environment, accumulate in living organisms, are transported over long distances, or pose a potential hazard," unquote, says Annika Janke, author and environmental chemist at the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research. Spread of micro and nanoplastics in the ocean. The highest concentrations of plastics are found in the regions of garbage patches. Those oceanic dumps function like industrial plants where micro and nanoplastics are continuously generated. Much like a virus spreads through the body via the bloodstream, microplastics are transported by ocean currents throughout the world's oceans, underscoring the global scale of the issue. Despite technical challenges in detecting microplastics, which complicate their accurate quantification in the oceans, theoretical models make it possible to estimate the magnitude of the problem. Microplastics are found in nearly every sample of ocean water, while in some regions, concentrations are dozens of times higher than the global average. Oceanic gyres contribute to the widespread distribution of microplastics, reaching even remote regions such as the Arctic. Studies of ice cores have shown that microplastic pollution levels in the Arctic Ocean are 100 times higher than those in the waters of north of Scotland or the North Pacific subtropic gyre. These findings point to both the severity and transboundary nature of the problem. Most global studies on plastic pollution in marine environments focus on the ocean's surface layer. According to estimates, in 2019, the surface layer of the ocean contained between 82 and 358 trillion plastic particles. However, there is mounting evidence that in deep sea zones and bottom sediments, the number of microplastic particles may reach uncountable trillions. Lightweight plastics tend to float, while denser plastics, or those colonized by marine organisms, sink to the ocean floor. Estimates suggest that about 50% of urban plastic waste is denser than seawater, allowing it to settle quickly. Once on the seafloor, it is transported by deep sea currents and accumulates in trenches and depressions. Microplastics have even been found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest known point in the ocean. In fact, the primary site of microplastics accumulation is not the ocean surface, but the deep sea floor. Gradually, the entire ocean floor is becoming covered with a layer of plastics. However, Data on microplastic pollution in the ocean is likely underestimated, and the actual situation may be significantly worse. Quote, "Not everyone has access to very sophisticated and expensive instruments and sampling tools,"
unquote, explains Melanie Bergman, a biologist at the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany.
She says that as much as 80 to 90% of marine microplastic particles may be missed by standard sampling techniques because they are too small to be detected. In addition to surface and bottom layer pollution, the concentrations of micro and nanoplastics increase significantly in the thermocline zone, a layer of water characterized by a sharp temperature change. The steep density gradient in this layer causes plastic particles to become trapped for extended periods. The ocean can be visualized as a layered cake, where each layer has a unique temperature and density, and microplastics accumulate at the boundaries between those layers. Furthermore, microplastics are dispersed throughout the ocean via living organisms that ingest, digest, and excrete them. Spread of MNPs in the environment. When water evaporates, microplastics rise into the atmosphere from the surface of the ocean. Additionally, a combination of sea spray, wind, and waves creates air bubbles in the water that contain microplastics. When the bubbles burst, the particles are released into the atmosphere. Each year, around 136,000 tons of microplastic is transported to coastal areas by sea breezes alone. Up to 25 million metric tons of micro and nanoplastic is transported annually for thousands of kilometers by marine air, spray, snow, and fog crossing countries, continents, and oceans. Quote, "Air is a much more dynamic medium than water," unquote, says co-author Dr. Melanie Bergman from AWI. Quote, "As a result, micro and nanoplastics can reach the most remote and so far largely untouched regions of our planet much more quickly," unquote. Once there, the particles may affect surface climate and the health of local ecosystems. Microplastics have been found in various places, from the sea surface to deep sea sediments, from agricultural lands to our highest mountains, as well as in sea ice, lakes, and rivers. They have been detected in 1,300 aquatic and terrestrial species, from invertebrates at the base of the food chain to the top predators, with evidence of impact at all levels of biological organization, from the cellular to the ecosystem level. Microplastics are widespread in the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. They have been found in many human tissues and organs, and evidence of their potential effect is beginning to emerge. Thus, the transport of microplastics to remote or even polar regions may be due to a combination of atmospheric and marine pathways. Therefore, it is important to understand the interaction between the atmosphere and the ocean in order to determine which particle sizes are being transported and in what quantities. For example, a group of researchers recently discovered plastic granules with hydrophilic, water-attracting surfaces in clouds atop mountains in Japan. They then analyzed the samples and concluded that lower altitude and denser clouds contain higher amounts of microplastics.
The presence of polymers
acting as condensation nuclei plays a key role in rapid cloud formation, which may ultimately influence the overall climate. Plastic particles in clouds help retain more water, delaying rainfall. When rain finally occurs, it becomes more intense, as more water has accumulated in the clouds. In addition, microplastics that had been exposed to ultraviolet light and filtered water from clouds have a rougher surface, which promotes the accumulation of more lead, mercury, and oxygen-containing groups on their surface. The atmosphere primarily transports small microplastic particles, making it a much faster transport pathway that can result in significant deposition across a wide range of ecosystems. Research data shows that forests act as barriers to wind-borne microplastics. Leaves, branches, and trunks trap microplastic particles, which settle on the surfaces. This causes microplastic particles carried by the wind and precipitation to remain on the plants or settle on the ground. Limited airflow beneath the dense forest canopy promotes the sustained accumulation of these particles within forested areas. The canopy leaves serve as a long-term reservoir for airborne microplastics. Studies have shown that from autumn 2017 to summer 2019, more than 1,000 tons of plastic particles fell with precipitation across 11 national parks and reserves in the western United States. This amount is enough to produce 120 million plastic bottles. A similar situation is observed in other regions of the world. For example, Quercus serrata, forests in Japan, covering an area of about 32,500 square kilometers, annually captured approximately 420 trillion airborne microplastic particles in their canopies. Unlike forests, in the cities, there is a better deposition of micro and nanoplastics because of better ventilation and the presence of heavier particles from vehicle exhaust and industrial smog. Today, the air in forests is more saturated with nanoplastic than in megacities. The world has changed. Now, when people swim in the ocean, sunbathe on the beach, jog along the coast or in the park, or walk in the forest for their health, they are, in fact, exposing their bodies to additional microplastic contamination. Microplastics from Africa and North America have been found in remote and seemingly untouched places, such as the French Pyrenees. This indicates the global distribution of microplastic, which is carried by air currents and precipitation across vast distances. Micro and nanoplastics enter urban water bodies through stormwater runoff, industrial discharge, and rainwater, which captures particles from the atmosphere. For example, a single wash of synthetic fabrics can release up to 1.5 million microplastic particles into wastewater. Once in the sewage, these particles eventually flow into rivers and oceans, where they are ingested by fish and other aquatic organisms. By analyzing waste found in rivers and surrounding landscapes, researchers estimated that just 10 river systems transport between 88% and 95% of the plastic that flows from rivers into the ocean. In another study, scientists reassessed commonly accepted assumptions about plastic transport in rivers and concluded that the actual amount of plastic waste in rivers could be 90% higher than previously thought. Plastic is also present in most of the world's large lakes. In fact, the density of plastic waste in lakes may even exceed that in the largest oceanic garbage patches, and even lakes located in pristine areas contain significant amount of debris. This was confirmed by a major international study led by Barbara Leone and Veronica Nava from the University of Milano Bicocca. According to the 2021 report by the United Nations Environment Program, microplastic was found in all freshwater bodies studied, including rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. For example, researchers found that nearly 10,000 metric tons, or 22 million pounds, of plastic waste enter the Great Lakes from the United States and Canada every year. Eventually, microplastic returns to humans through the consumption of fish and seafood. Italian scientists have also discovered that fruits and vegetables contain millions of microplastic particles. High concentrations were found in apples, pears, carrots, potatoes, lettuce, and broccoli. Notably, fruit contained 2 to 3 times more microplastic particles than vegetables, ranging from 52,000 particles per gram in lettuce to 223,000 particles per gram in apples. A study found that 81% of 159 tap water samples from around the world contained microplastics. Other research supports these findings, also detecting microplastic particles in bottled mineral water. Interestingly, the number of particles was roughly the same in both glass and polyethylene terephthalate (PET) bottles, with concentrations reaching 6,292 particles per liter. Researchers from the University of Newcastle, Australia, conducted a study to estimate how much plastic the average person consumes. Their results showed that a person ingests about 250 grams of plastic per year, equivalent to 50 plastic bags.